Fittingly, I thought the Colts deserve, frankly, to pull their own plug on the season, and they did that in Mount Rushmore embarrassing fashion yesterday in New York, 45-33. That now means 4 years without a playoff appearance, 6 without a playoff win. It probably should be noted the playoff also expanded format within that time frame from 6 to 7 teams, and yet the worst playoff stretch in this franchise's last 30 years is alive and sadly well here as we enter 2025. I'm Kevin Bowen back, Colts Corner with Kevin Bowen, Eddie Garrison on the ones and twos. Eddie, a happy new year to you. By the way, I forgot your Christmas present again. It's still in my car. I just remembered it. I apologize.
Kev, I'm great, and you want to know why I'm great?
Why is that?
I'm a savage.
Yeah, that was the 3rd and 8 converted right after that from Zaire Franklin.
Sure. But hey, Pro Bowl bound, right?
Watching that yesterday, I felt an awkward state of relief. And I know that might not be the word to quite use on this Monday morning, but let me explain a little bit more in graphic detail. The relief is like the violent puking relief when you finally think you're at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think this is the last time I'm going to hug the toilet. I think it's the last time my throat is going to feel like that for hopefully quite a while.
Didn't have a vomiting experience being the analogy being
but
made
like
today.
it can't just be normal relief.
Yeah.
Like it's got to be, you have to go through pain to experience the relief. The pain is what we watched.
Yeah.
I mean, that was 60 minutes of absolutely pathetic football, certainly in 2 phases. And you have, watching it, and this is probably a tad bit of wishful thinking, honestly, but it's like, isn't that the Ryan Walters bucket game moment? Like, is that the final straw?
Is that the game where fans go from being apathetic to hatred?
Yeah. And you could probably make a strong argument, Eddie. Like, there are probably a lot of fans that would sit here and say, Kevin, I didn't need to watch. I didn't need an extra 60 minutes. But, Eddie, I'm trying to speak to Jim Irsay's mind for just a second here. We'll get more into the pod throughout, and we'll still get to what I liked and what I didn't like. And obviously, a lot of your Twitter questions are big picture today. But, that embarrassment with so much at stake, coupled with ex-player reactions, whether it's Marlon Jackson yesterday on Wish TV, whether it's Pat McAfee and such the blowtorch of a tweet that he shared as well, what bothers Irsay? That stuff bothers Irsay.
Former players that he respects.
Right. I could argue a whole lot should bother him, but again, I need to speak to his language because ultimately we're about to enter a period where that's all that matters. Mm-hmm. I can give my opinion. I'll give it throughout this podcast. To put it very simply, I won't bury the lead any longer. But a week from today, Chris Ballard and Gus Bradley should be fired. That's where I start. I think it's deserved. I think they've had their opportunities. And we'll get into more of that. But just to kind of boil it down to yesterday, awkward relief. The Colts didn't deserve 9-8. They didn't deserve to have a better than 500 season. They deserve to be the ones to end their own season. Not the Broncos and Bo Nix doing it in Cincinnati.
Nope.
No. They deserve to have that happen to them. 45 points to the bleeping Giants. I didn't know Drew Lock was on the Giants until last month.
He was underneath an MRI machine last Monday.
Great point. Colts tackling air, balls hitting Jonathan Taylor in the head like they hit Max Bowen on his Fisher-Price goal. It was just amazing. It was amazing to watch unfold. So, Eddie, unless you've got any more overall game thoughts, let's get into what I liked and what I didn't like.
I know we'll have plenty of time the next handful of weeks to discuss the future of Ballard and Steichen and Gus Bradley and everything, but just my quick overall thoughts on it, because you mentioned it. I don't see them firing Chris. What they'll do is they'll sell it as, well, look how bad this defense was. Let's get a new D coordinator in there, and then Chris Ballard's on the final year of his deal. We'll let it play out another year with Anthony Richardson, and then we can make the determination after next season if we want to keep moving forward with Chris Ballard and Anthony Richardson and Shane Steichen.
Who wanted this defense?
That's a good question.
Who wanted it? Who has wanted this overall defensive philosophy? Who spent gobs and gobs of draft picks on the defensive side of the ball early in his tenure.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm countering your thought.
Right.
I get why you said it, and I don't think it's the most outlandish statement considering how Jim Irsay is largely operated, but I just counter it to say no. No, I just think that's a lazy cop-out excuse. Chris Ballard is one of this defense. He wanted Matt Eberflus for Josh McDaniels. He wanted Gus Bradley, and I know they're not the exact same, but they're largely philosophically built on some consistent core principles. So, yeah, we'll have Twitter questions to dive more into that stuff, but no thank you.
Let's start right there with what you didn't like the defense. I think E.J. Speed is missing a tackle somewhere right about now.
Eddie, they entered Sunday with the most missed tackles in the NFL by 20. 141 missed tackles this season.
I didn't even know that was a stat.
I believe the Raiders were second with 121. How many do you think they missed on Sunday? I don't know if the stats crews tabulated that. So they, 16 games played up until that point, 141. So they were missing on average a little less than 10 a game.
Well, there were 2 missed tackles on both Malik Neighbors' touchdowns.
Missed, 15? I mean, just go back to all the touchdowns. The 3rd and 14 to Neighbors. The 3rd and 8 to Slayton. That was a missed tackle.
Mm-hmm.
The Drew Lock scramble. That's an E.J. Speed missed tackle.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously brought up the Neighbors button hook that he then takes for a touchdown. The Giants average 14 a game. They don't get the opening kickoff. And with 5 minutes to go in the first half, they have 21.
Mm-hmm.
On long drives. It's not like they picked Flacco and returned it to the 5.
No.
I mean, we're talking long drives here.
What chunk plays?
45 points for the Giants. After the game, I said, boy, I wonder how many minutes you have to go back to find when the Giants scored 45. Obviously, you have to go back multiple games. So they scored 45 in 60 minutes against you. If I added it up correctly, you have to go back 213 minutes of football prior to Sunday to find them scoring 45.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's, 3.5 games. Just so much of it is rooted in tackling. I thought Zaire Franklin had kind of a interesting quote after the game about just it's too many guys one-on-one on an island trying to make a tackle, and if you miss against these elite athletes, it's going to turn into a big play. I couldn't tell if there was a little subtle shot at Gus Bradley or what, but nonetheless, I've probably said it less than 5 times in my career on doing these Monday podcasts, Eddie, and he's an outstanding player, and he's been an outstanding story in this league. I thought one of the worst games for Kenny Moore in a long time. And just in general, your secondary was really, really struggling. Pass rush, library quiet. I've said that way too often, frankly, for how much is invested in that group. Drew Lock, I believe 25 dropbacks for him. No sacks, 1 hit. Yeah. So defense. The list goes on and on. I think Devin Singletary is still in that pile, running for 10, 15 yards extra the initial hit. So poor angles, poor tackling, all of it. All of it. So, yes, what I didn't like, we'll start there with Gus Bradley adding one more to the resume.
I just don't understand what the game plan was for Malik Neighbors. He is all they have. Yeah. It's him, and that's it. Tyrone Tracy's been a good story for them, but, they throw it to Malik Neighbors over 10 times every single game, and you go out there for the entire first half, and you're like, okay, Jalen Jones, okay, Kenny Moore, it's you versus him. Go win. That's not going to happen at all.
They get that first 3rd and 14, and I think at that point Neighbors had yet to be targeted. So I remember them coming to the line of scrimmage, and I'm thinking, okay, they're going to target Neighbors here. I'm curious how they will. And they bring him in motion. Kenny was first on him. They bring him in motion. Well, Kenny doesn't move with that motion.
Mm-hmm.
Kenny stays.
Zone
and it's
coverage.
Okay, here we go here. Now it's, I think Womack, Brentson, Blackman, I think we're kind of on that side.
Juju played yesterday? I didn't even know.
Not Brent, sorry, Cross. I think it was Womack, Cross, and Blackman. And sure enough, boom. Because, Kenny blows up screens. I mean, Kenny's done that throughout his career. And great work by the Giants. They got Neighbors away from Kenny. They isolate him in a very simple play for Drew Lock. And then let's see if the worst tackling team in the NFL can tackle.
What was the down in distance, 3rd and what?
It was 3rd and 14, the first touchdown.
Okay, and then, because I made the comment, why are you blitzing? You're bringing the house on 3rd and 14, and the scream is a perfect call to counter the blitz.
Right, yeah. So, again, defense easily the worst thing I didn't like from yesterday.
And then one final thing, let's just add more gasoline to the fire, Eddie. I'm sick and tired of watching 3rd and 6, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 14, and the DBs are playing 2 yards in front of the sticks, and they still give up first downs because they can't tackle.
Yeah, I mean, the 3rd and 8 to Slayton was certainly that.
The Wandale Robinson had one.
Yeah, Robinson had a big one there in the second half, so plenty.
Special teams, item number 2 and what you did not like.
I mean, I know the camera angle was awful, but that opening kickoff to the third quarter, I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, right up the gut.
Was there a fingernail on him?
Right up the gut. Yeah, Matt Gay, maybe. I mean, yeah. And then obviously Gay misses the 54-yarder. And look, it's a 54-yarder. I'm not here to act like those need to be money, but obviously he has struggled from north of 50 this season. I thought the play calling around the 54-yarder, I just assumed Kenny Albert was wrong when he said on the 4th and 3, and here comes Matt Gay onto the field. I'm like, no way. They don't run it on 3rd and 8 to kick it on 4th and 3.
Uh-huh.
I just assumed they would go for it there. So just a poor day for a special teams unit. And, you know, that, again, I don't know what the stats are, but, you know, they have to be north of 80% teams returning a kick for a touchdown against you, especially in today's football. What the percentage is of a loss on that. And, I mean, obviously that was a huge play. You know, I know you lost by 12, but still, I think the complexion of the second half could have changed a whole lot had that not been allowed. So there have been some shaky special teams moments in kind of a variety of areas this season. But yesterday, considering that return, might have been the most damning.
We haven't talked about this player in a negative light as much as we have this season. It feels like Jonathan Taylor's head, the 3rd and 2, and he runs out of bounds a yard short, and then he can't get the 4th and 1, and then, of course, the 2-point conversion where I think it was a little too much. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, again, what I didn't like, I said to you, Jonathan Taylor's head. There's just times where I'm just like, what? You know, like I'm just kind of like, I don't, he's a great first and second down talent. But man, like liability at other moments, particularly in passing moments. And you pointed to one passing moment. He's got the highest drop rate of his career this season. I thought he was really favoring the ankle before the 2-point try.
Jonathan Vilma kept pointing that out.
Yeah, and I felt that just watching Taylor as much as I've watched him. And so, look, it was there, certainly. I mean, it was there. I think Taylor, had he caught it, I think he would have had his momentum. I think he would have beat that DB to the pylon and converted it. But it's just like I'm not blaming Shane Steichen necessarily. It just seemed a hair too rich for me at that moment. And it's sad that I say that because you can't trust Jonathan Taylor to catch the football. But, like, I don't really trust Jonathan Taylor to catch the football. I don't. Like, I mean, I think he's proven that throughout his career. Sure, he's got a moment or two in the passing game. But, like, he's got a lot of drops. A lot of drops. And again, this year is a career high in drops. I'd say of all the Taylor issues, the ball on the side of the helmet that looked like Peyton Manning throwing to the Saturday Night Live kids, the 2-point conversion drop, you mentioned 4th and inches. I'll go back to 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 1.
I mentioned both, yeah.
That is the one. That is a must-have, extend that ball across the pile. You see it. It's right in front of you. Your eyes are right there. And whether he wants to dive, he can keep the ball in that hand and just dive, or he could, switch hands, which I get switch hands is a little bit more complicated. I do think you see a lot of quarterbacks are very good about that. Quarterbacks get to that sideline, they're able to just kind of put that hand out. Mahomes is certainly probably the poster child of it, but there are a lot of QBs I think are really, really good at it. That, to me, was just such a, I'll use the word blunder, of just like, wait, what? Did he not see the chains there? That was my general thought on that play. And it was just like I'm not one that usually believes this, but there was an element of me, like, as soon as that play happened and they got back in the huddle to go for it, I go, oh boy, football karma's not letting you get this 4th down.
Nope.
Football juju, football gods are watching, and they're up there wagging Dikembe Mutombo in you. They're saying, no, you're going to get close, but you ain't getting it. And sure enough, boom. So, yeah, And I don't know. I'm probably going back a couple weeks with Taylor and obviously dropping the ball at the goal line. But, man, for such a special talent, there are just some mistakes that he has in a game, usually centered around the passing game, that are head-scratching. And I thought yesterday he had several of them in big second-half moments.
Trying to think. Is that another benchable moment?
Yeah, I guess I would say first, which one? Again, to go back to the Denver game, which I know people are ready to move on from, I would have benched him for a couple plays in the next series. If you're going to be about accountability, I would be about it. We see Taylor sit for 6 to 10 plays every game? That seems to be kind of how they use Trey Sermon, Tyler Goodson, right around there. I would have no point in saying, hey, we're going to sit you start this drive. Because, I was adamant. I didn't think that all of a sudden Taylor dropping the ball on the goal line meant he was going to rip off an 80-yarder the next play. No, he's going to hold on to that ball like it's me in the engagement ring.
Yeah.
Like it's me with my grandma. Rest in peace to Ann Donahue. That's what I envisioned, and that's what happened. He had 14 yards and 7 carries the rest of the game. So, again, benchable. It's just a conversation that, if I'm today and I'm DeAndre Smith, and I'm in that meeting room as a running backs coach, I'm like, walk me through this. Do you not see the chains there? Do you not?
I understand how close you were to the out of bounds.
That's a must-have moment. We talk about this with Richardson a lot. The must-haves. Richardson, he probably does more than not with those must-haves. He lays his body on the line, I would argue, a lot of times in those moments. That's a must-have.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have it. And just head-scratching.
Anything else to add here in the what you did not like section?
No, I don't. I'll get big picture stuff. We'll save for Twitter questions, but I want to stick to the 60-minute game if we can.
Let's pivot to what you did like. When you sent me the rundown, sometimes you send me names like you did here with Jonathan Taylor's head. This go around for what you liked. You said 11 and 14. That's Michael Pittman Jr. and Alec Pierce.
I thought they were really good. I thought probably their best combined game of the season. Eddie, obviously you could point to just the raw numbers. Pittman 9 for 109 on 10 targets. Pierce 6 for 122. That obviously doesn't account for the DPI as well.
Yep.
That he drew, also a touchdown. I just thought they made really good moment of truth, contested catch plays down the field. Yeah, I thought really good. And I thought probably the best we've seen. Pierce, I think, has had a really nice season, certainly.
Oh, yeah.
But again, I thought Pittman he made more of those plays. And I guess there's no way to say this without it coming as a shot at Anthony Richardson, but let's just call a spade a spade. Joe Flacco gave them more chances to make those plays.
Yeah.
Yes, Flacco misses 80 on the airmail on the touchdown, and he has obviously the interception. That was costly early on. I thought kind of gave the Giants a little bit of early life, but still, I thought they deserved praise for their effort, and I thought Flacco threw the ball fairly well and kind of gave those guys chances to be, 6'3", 6'4", climb the ladder type of players. So I thought really, really good work from Pittman and Pierce, and I thought they deserved mention here, and that's about the only thing I liked.
What about 83?
Yeah, 4th and 5 was a big play. That was a big play late in the first half. Yeah, I could probably – I guess in general, I think I wrote this after the game. I thought it was the best day for the Colts pass catchers.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that's all-encompassing now again.
Is that excluding A.D. Mitchell?
Right. You exclude A.D.'s drop, obviously Taylor – but Granson specifically, and then Pearson Pitt as well. They hung in there. There were moments that felt like the Jacksonville game all over again with Flacco just throwing it up to Pierce.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a beautiful weapon that Pierce brings to the table of just you don't feel like you're out of it because you can just chuck it deep to him and you got to commit a safety over the top. So the only thing I liked.
I thought the rush defense was solid yesterday. You eliminate just that 40-yard run from Tyrone Tracy. It's 19 for 19.
Yeah, yeah.
And they run it 29 times for 40 yards.
Yeah. I get it. I think we're maybe nitpicking a hair on it. You're probably right, but You allow 45 points. There's not a lot I can compliment the defense on.
Correct. Ready for Twitter questions?
Let's do it.
Yeah, plenty to get to, rightfully so, after the way they performed yesterday, starting with Curtis.
And I guess let me start here, Eddie. We got a lot of them. Some of these, obviously, we could probably save.
Oh, yeah.
I do understand the big picture tone that a lot of people have, and like you said, very understandably so. There are definitely some that we'll save for the offseason, but I think there's also a lot that need to be addressing because a week from today, we need to be talking about changes.
Curtis is up first. If this game doesn't sum up the need for a change on defense, what will?
Gosh, that's so true. And Curtis, this comes back to what I said to lead off the pod. It's the violent relief that I felt like I was watching. We'll see if it happens, but that's what it felt like to me. And again, I tweeted out some of the things in 2024 afterwards. I mean, right out of the gate, you have all this continuity on defense, and there's Joe Mixon turning back the clock. There's Josh Jacobs turning back the clock. Trevor Lawrence career high. You've allowed, all these rookie quarterbacks.
Caleb Williams.
Their best games have been against you.
Mm-hmm.
Drake May, Caleb Williams. The Jets score their most points this season.
Drew Lock career game.
Yeah, the Giants score their most points this season. Drew Lock career game.
Trevor Lawrence in the past.
And like Trevor Lawrence was mystifyingly bad at that point of the season. Remember how bad he was?
Yes.
The first 4 weeks? And then boom, he plays you. And, you play the Colts defense and you go on, you have a midlife crisis and you're going on a retreat.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was.
You better hand the game to the Colts because the Colts will give the game to you.
The scheme is soft. Clearly the personnel isn't good or dynamic enough. Again, I mean, you want to blame the guys that are way too often on islands and they're, whiffing, et cetera, et cetera. And if you just want to boil it down to points, Eddie, 29th, I believe, as we wake up here with 1 week to go in the season, 27th this season in points allowed. And just in general.
Getting better, Kevin.
In general, you don't challenge the opponent's mental preparation enough.
There's no edge.
That's a core
aggression,
belief.
Physicality, none of that.
Shane Steichen has a core belief. One of his 4, preparation. He thinks, I think a lot of that gets into, and we'll get into it here, a lot of his gamesmanship around what I think is poor messaging around Anthony Richardson. He is a big believer in the gamesmanship. That's why I wrote in the first sentence of my story on Friday, I go, don't believe the gamesmanship for 1 second. Don't believe that Anthony Richardson has a chance to play for 1 second.
Yeah.
This is gamesmanship. And that's exactly what you saw. Then why is he content with a defense that is one of the ones that you have to least prepare for in the NFL? Because that's the reality of the Colts. And I think bend but don't break is such a soft approach to defensive football. Even if you do have drives, Eddie, where, hey, 7-play, 48-yard drive, but no points, you just allowed 48 yards.
Mm-hmm.
What does that do?
Time off the clock.
Time off the clock, tires your defense, and puts your offense in less than favorable situations.
Yeah.
It's not playing complementary football.
No.
You don't dictate enough short fields to your other unit to help you out. So,
and you're helping the other team's defense at the same time.
Certainly. And again, I think a week from today, Chris Ballard and Gus Bradley both should lose their jobs. I think you need to have a serious undertaking of what your defensive approach needs to be. And I think it's time.
We don't have any Twitter questions about this. We only had one pod last week because of Christmas. You mentioned Anthony Richardson. Let's get into that here just a little bit. The fact that, to me, your quarterback can't attempt to play or practice with back spasms, to me is, and I hate using this word when it comes to NFL players, is soft. Last year, Amon-Ra St. Brown tears his oblique off the bone, misses 1 game. Fred Warner is out there for San Francisco, eliminated from the playoffs, playing on a broken ankle. You've got Michael Pittman Jr. playing with whatever is this severe back injury is that was allegedly going to put him on injured reserve and require possibly surgery. But you can't go out there when your season is on the line to try to tough it out for your guys. That, to me, is just SOFT.
Yeah, I don't believe
in all capital letters.
Yeah, I don't believe Anthony Richardson is a soft football player. I don't believe that. I think if he could have played, that he would have been allowed to play.
What has told you that, or where can you point to where you can say that he's not? Because you go back to the head tap. He taps out because he's tired, Kev. That is a soft football player.
Yeah, I've
You
never
don't
once
try to,
watched.
and I hate trying to say that about a football player because I know they're way tougher than me. They're bigger, they're stronger, they're more athletic than me. But like when I sit here and I sit back and I look at these things, I don't see a guy that's trying to do the right thing and help his football team.
Yeah.
I don't see a guy who's trying to go out there and play through a lacerated kidney.
Yeah, I've never watched him play the game of football and thought for 1 second he was being soft. He was avoiding contact. He was scared to initiate physicality, any of those signs. Obviously, the tap out is something that you've never seen. And I thought it was a very immature move. I don't think it was an indicator that he is a soft player. I think that is a big term, as you allude to. And so I think I want to make sure that if I'm going to use that, it's in a very accurate sense. And I just don't think that word applies to Anthony Richardson.
Why?
I think when you watch him play and you watch him in particular run the football, excuse me, I think that's where you would see soft moments. And feel free to show me plays that you feel like, outside of the tap out, I guess, that you feel like he eludes contact. He avoids it. He is scared. He is bailing on his first read in the pocket because a 300-pound defensive lineman's in his face. I don't see any of that in his game. I think there are plenty of questions to have about Anthony Richardson. Injury-related, durability-related, the ability to play the game of football in the manner that he needs to play it to be successful and stay healthy. I think all of those are fair. I think calling him soft, I do think that is an unfair statement.
I don't want to say physically. I think mentally. More so than anything, than being able to try and fight through those things.
Yeah, again, I think people fall into the trap too many times of like the player gets to decide whether he's out there or not. I don't think that is necessarily true. I think certainly guys play through stuff, but I think there are times where a player is not able to play and the team therefore then protects that player from trying to play. So again, Anthony Richardson questions for me. Plenty of them. It's not trending in the right direction. We'll get into Richardson. We'll probably have more of a Richardson-centric pod here coming up in January. I don't think I'm at the point where it's you drive him to the airport and you're done with him. But certainly you've ended year two, and I don't really care about 60 minutes against the Jags coming up on Sunday. You've ended year two with the arrow pointing in, I would say, an opposite direction of where you were at probably this time last year. And obviously this time last year it was much more injury-related. The sample size was so small, but you felt like, hey, 4 games, hey, look, you did fairly well, et cetera, et cetera. This year you've seen 11 games of the sample size. It hasn't gone very well. So that's probably where I'm at, Richardson related. Obviously him as a thrower needs major attention. There is an overall injury question that I think is separate from the word soft that is totally fair.
Fragile? Is that a better word than soft?
Yeah, but again, to me, that gets more into your physical makeup of like, why can't he stay healthy? Why can't he, I watched Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is a string bean compared to Anthony Richardson, and he's able to run the football to that degree. So is this just as weird as it sounds, a body composition thing where Anthony Richardson gets hurt more than others? That is a totally fair question. And this also gets into just a very different conversation of his overall play. Because his overall play deserves probably the first attention of just like, hey, can he throw the football accurately enough? Can he have consistency over 60 minutes? Those are all entirely fair questions to have on him. But, I thought honestly before last week, you would chalk that up to a pretty good health season for Richardson, all things considered.
Yep.
The fact that he had only missed 2 games due to the oblique, as weird as it sounds, technically it was the first missed practice time he had last week. That was the first missed practice time of the entire season. He didn't miss practice, technically, in the oblique. So, mental makeup and what it means to be a quarterback and wearing the captaincy and all of that, yeah, I think all of that deserves questioning, but I don't look at last week and think Anthony Richardson is soft. Again, to me, if you're going to use the word soft and you're going to say it in all caps, that's a big, big, big word to use. Having said that, I don't think that all of a sudden sweeps things under the rug for Richardson. I thought Shane Steichen's messaging, once again, was very poor in regards to Richardson. I think you have seen other people in the Colts organization and Richardson's camp try to come out in the last 48 hours to cover up Shane Steichen's insane adherence to gamesmanship.
What would that be? Because if someone's out there that hasn't seen any of that, what are you alluding to?
Just the amount, Jay Glazer, for example, had the report right before the Colts game started on Sunday of explaining that, how serious the spasms were with Richardson. I think Stephen Holder's reporting here in the last 24 hours has been much more on the type of pain that Richardson was in and his inability to give it a go. So I think that is clearing up Shane using the phrase of really sore. Shane is so nervous and hesitant to say anything that can be construed as, oh my gosh, he might not play in this game. Brian Daboll's going to have an extra 3 hours to prepare a Joe Flacco game plan. I mean, that's I wrote it in my story on Friday. Eddie, 26 Colts players have missed a full week of practice this season. This is before Richardson. 26.
Yeah.
25 of them missed that game. The one player was Buckner, who played 10 snaps against Green Bay before he got hurt on a serious pitch count. There was no chance in hell Anthony Richardson was playing on Sunday.
Correct.
But again, Shane Steichen, instead of saying, hey, boy, it's just the wear and tear of the season. He's got some bad spasms. He's unable to go. He uses the phrase really sore. And naturally, people that call Anthony Richardson Tony Glass are going to feast upon that. You can have a general Richardson injury durability, fragile is the word you used earlier, all fair questions in regards to his ability to stay healthy in the NFL. But I thought Shane trying to downplay the severity of Anthony Richardson was just another disservice at him. And it allows people to run with whatever messages they want to run with. And again, I think you saw Shane back during the benching be vague for what, 2 weeks? The first 2 weeks, vague, change the messaging, process, and standard, and this and that. And then finally, he gets to the point where he wants to put Richardson back in the lineup, and he decides to be expansive. He decides to sound like a different head coach for a second. And it's like, whoa, where did this come from? Why wasn't that message there on day one? Where I think it's important. And I guess this kind of gets in the other angle of this general Shane Steichen messaging while we're on it, Eddie. A lot of people don't care about what the head coach says in a press conference. There are coaches that have said nothing, and they've won a lot. There are coaches that have said a lot and have won nothing. And obviously the flip side of it. There are coaches that have said a lot and won a lot. There are coaches that say a lot and win nothing. So, selfishly, I'd obviously want more transparency.
Yes.
I think it's easier for me to do my job if I can be biased. And I also think it's great for fans. And I just think Shane chooses, right or wrong, that he is going to get up there and say nothing. Nothing.
Yeah.
And if you watch the press conferences, I would argue, of the 32 head coaches in the league, and I watch every single one of the opposing head coaches' press conferences the week the Colts play them, I would argue that Shane Steichen is one that says very, very few words.
And the other one was the coach that he went up against. Daboll didn't say much either.
Daboll says nothing, and then you watch Daboll postgame yesterday, and oh my gosh, you would have thought someone had given him 4 shots before he walked to the podium.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable how much he decided to talk postgame. So, look, I don't... I think Shane has handled the messaging poorly. Some care about it, some don't. My worry is, when does that messaging become also what you're believing and saying behind closed doors? And I guess I'm referencing the owner now.
Yeah.
When Jim Irsay tells us Chris Ballard's a blue chip GM, and I sit here and say, you're lying to us, do you also believe that? Do you really believe he's a blue chip GM?
Can you trick yourself into believing it? Yeah.
Because if that's the case, oh shit, we got some real issues.
Oh yeah.
On hand. So let me be clear. I don't think Steichen's words about Richardson are to that magnitude of continuing to run it back with a GM that doesn't deserve to have that position anymore. But there is just some overall. Richardson meets the media after his benching and says, "Yeah, I don't know why I was benched." Okay, what are we doing here?
And then they had a meeting with him.
Right. So, again, that's where some of it is just like, okay, Shane, the head coach hat, there's a little bit more on your plate now. Like, I get he wants to be in the bunker. The man loves football more than I love Tiger Woods and Matty Bowen, and I probably should have reordered that. Matty Bowen, Tiger Woods, and all of my children, put them again above Tiger. And
do you
Notre
want
Dame.
me to? You just want to redo that? I can clean it up for you on the editing part.
It's Tiger's birthday today, to be fair. I think that's why I mentioned him first.
Ah, okay.
Tiger, LeBron, and Carson Wentz all sharing the same birthday there. 3 of the true GOATs out there in the world. So, somebody sent me a tweet after the game. I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was Greg, of he goes, I think both Anthony Richardson and Shane Steichen have found out the NFL is real, and previous experience or lack thereof hasn't prepared them. I think that's accurate.
Yeah.
For both parties. So I guess to summarize it all up, because I know we've gotten off a little bit of the beaten path. Anthony Richardson has real questions entering year 3. Accuracy, everything that goes into being a quarterback, and staying healthy. All of that is there. And I think Shane Steichen just needs to handle the messaging a little bit better. I'm not going to make it into a bigger deal than it needs to be, because I don't think it needs, I know there are a lot of people that are just ripping Shane for the messaging. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, I think it's a problem. I'm not going to act like it deserves, the next 6 podcasts. So that's where I'm at. I know he was asked about it after the game yesterday. I thought it was a fine question to ask him about. And I see no reason to ask him about it today when we meet with him here in about 4 hours.
I'd have to go back and look. I don't know if you'd be able to provide an answer on this, but has Anthony played in a game this season in which he was listed on the injury report all week for something?
I guess technically, I think he dressed.
Played.
Yeah, played. He dressed against the Vikings. I think he was on injury report. He has yet to play an NFL game where he's had a limited practice week. And again, he practiced the full week. He hasn't been on the injury report very often, to be fair. He technically practiced both weeks of the oblique. Remember, we got to that Friday practice, Titans game, I think it was, and all of a sudden he went back to limited, and then he was out. So, there is, and this is me, and I'll acknowledge it right now, I'm putting my hat on. This is a little bit of a conspiracy hat right here. There is a part of me, Eddie, that feels like I don't think it's the case, but is there a handcuffing of Anthony Richardson at various points? Did you get to the end of the Titans weekend and you think to yourself, oh man, we really need to win this game, and if he's less than 100%, I'm nervous about putting him out here and I'm going to hold him back? Is
that you being Shane, or is that you being Chris?
I guess Shane. I don't really care who, I guess. I mean, somebody obviously that makes those decisions inside that complex says a little bit of that. Now, again, I thought, and understandably because they ran the hell out of it, I thought they handcuffed him the rest of the game against Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Which, when Taylor's running like that, and Richardson throws the early pick, I get that. So there was a part of me that when I heard really sore, I kind of felt that. I was like, what? Are they? Is there more to the story here in this of yeah, I don't know if I, really trust them, and I don't know. I might throw Flacco out there in the game. Again, it's a conspiracy hat. I don't think that is true, but I want to make sure that I just reveal the thought that I had in my head, because I did. I did have that thought. So I think that covers everything on the Richardson-Steichen front. Again, I think Richardson deserves more of an entire podcast here at some point. I don't feel that time being right now, unless you got anything else, Eddie. Let's move on.
Gavin's Twitter question is up next. How much of this do you think is on the coaches and Shane and Gus versus the locker room? Especially on defense, there are more than a few plays where one or more defensive players just quit or loafs on a play. Feels like there's a massive culture problem showing up this season, or are we reading into these performances too much?
Gavin, if I could be totally honest with you, I don't think the guys quit. I just don't think the Colts are very good. Let's go through the wins, Eddie.
Do they have any winners? on their team?
Let's go through their wins this season. All right, they got 7 of them, correct? They're 7-9.
6-2 against teams under 500, 1-7 against teams above 500.
So 5 of those 7 wins are against teams drafted in the top 10. 5 of the 7. A 6th win occurred against the Miami Dolphins, starting Tyler Huntley and Tim Boyle. And the final win was against Justin Fields and the Steelers, correct? So
yes.
They did not beat a single team drafting outside of the top 10 with their starting quarterback. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes.
Yeah. I just, like, this 9-8 is not last year's 9-8. I said that on last week's podcast. Obviously, this year they won't be 9-8. And again, I think they are deserving to have a sub-500 season. Like, Chris Ballard's a big believer in point differential, Eddie. Their point differential is really bad. He thinks that's kind of an accurate measuring stick of a team. They're 10th in the AFC in that. I think they're like 22nd or 23rd in the NFL. They've got 3 wins by 2 scores in the last 2 years. 3 wins. Every team in the NFL but 3, I think, have more than that. Now, clearly, you have some cultural questions. I think Matt Eberflus, as much as I at times probably disagreed with the overall system approach, I do think the adherence to loafs and effort was there. But we can go through the list of quarterbacks they've beaten. It's not a pretty one here in the last 2 years.
Not at all. Conroy's up next. Do you think Jim Irsay doesn't want to fire Chris Ballard because he's tired of doing this process at his age? Like, he doesn't make sense at all. The hiring of the GM, probably a new head coach, probably a new quarterback. That's a lot for a guy at Jim Irsay's age. No disrespect, but I feel like this is a legit question considering what the product year in and year out is.
Yeah, Conroy, it's a...
Is it more... I don't know if it's his age. Maybe more so of his health status.
Yeah.
Jim Irsay is 65.
Right. It's a fair and it's frankly a sad question. And obviously I hope Jim Irsay is doing well health-wise. Certainly this time last year, things were not at all in a good spot. Eddie, we've seen him once since August. Is that correct?
And that was at the Dallas Clark Ring of Honor? Or would that be the one since...
Yeah, that would be the Dallas Clark Ring of Honor.
Okay.
We don't hear from him.
No.
Period. I think I told you on the podcast last week, I went through all the wins and losses in his tweets after games.
And then I pondered the question to you if it's actually him tweeting or if it's somebody within his...
And again, it's certainly there.
That has access to the account.
There are many people that have access to that account. So, it's a fair and sad question. And it also creates a large amount of just unknown in all of this playing out. All of it. And should we talk finance? 2026 for Ballard, 2028 for Steichen, right? In terms of their contracts?
I thought it was 20. Somebody had told me it was like through 2029 for Steichen, I thought.
I thought it was a 6-year deal. Well, I guess whatever 6 plus, the original is. So, nonetheless, it's a lot of years.
Yep.
And so I want to stress this, I guess for a second, if you don't mind, Eddie. Let me speak to Jim Irsay's language. Because I think I need to remove myself from, to me, no division titles in 10 years, no playoff wins in 6 years, no playoff appearance in 4 years. That should be damning enough. I can continue to go down the list if you'd like, but I've done that endlessly and I don't feel the need to repeat myself. But how about we just speak to Irsay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? No home playoff game. Saturday is what, Eddie? Saturday, January 4th.
2025?
It's the 10-year anniversary of the last home playoff game for the Colts. You've watched as 25 other teams in the league have hosted a home playoff game since you last have.
Yeah.
And you think about the financial impact. Okay, let's speak Irsay's language. Financially in your building, what a home playoff game means to your team.
Mm-hmm.
What does home playoff game mean?
National television.
Stand-alone primetime window. The Colts are top 3 biggest afterthoughts in the NFL right now, primetime football.
Uh-huh.
So again, speak to Irsay's language. No home playoff game of 60-some thousand in your building. The lack of primetime games, period, especially at home, of late. And now what have we seen in Lucas Oil this year?
Detroit fans, Pittsburgh fans, Chicago fans, empty.
Bills Mafia.
Yeah,
the only other
thank
one
you.
I had.
An empty stadium against Tennessee that looked like a preseason game.
And we'll see that again on Sunday. So you start to add that up, Eddie. Speak Irsay's language, okay?
I had a few fans messaging our show Twitter of Query and Company saying that they have tickets they were willing to give away.
Yeah, I saw someone tweet today, I'd love to give them to the local youth, but I don't want to do that to the local youth. I don't know if I should laugh or cry at that statement. Okay, if you speak to Irsay, I just spoke to him pretty much financially, right?
Yeah.
A lot. No home playoff game in your building, lack of primetime eyes, split crowds or no crowds, and then add what's happened the last 24 hours. Your ex-players that he holds in the highest regard. When's the one time we've seen him in the last 4 months?
Dallas Clark Ring of Honor. When all the players of the past were there.
Like, if I just speak to him, doesn't this indicate change? And I have not even touched the Chris Ballard specific resume of what the 8 years have unfolded.
Or lack thereof.
Right. Because if I simply want to list out where this team has finished in the AFC, 16 teams in this conference, correct?
Yes.
8 years of Chris Ballard. 13th, 6th, 10th, 7th, 8th, 15th, 9th, and currently 10th.
Mediocre.
That's a compliment to mediocre. So that if I'm just speaking there, it leads to change. But Conroy's overall premise of where is Irsay at, that general question, is one that I just shrugged my shoulders and put my hands in the air and dropped my pen 2 times in 10 seconds because I don't know.
Big Bama has a question along Jim Irsay. I don't know how much more you would add on top of this, but Big Bama's question is this enough evidence for Jim Irsay to make some changes in the organization and not just some move like getting rid of Gus Bradley? I mean, more like Chris Ballard. The culture of this organization stinks, and fans are tired of mediocre and unaccountable players and front office personnel, even Irsay himself.
Well, I guess let's just go to Ballard here. He deserves to lose his job. He deserved to lose it back in 2022. He did not. He deserves to lose it here. No ill will on the human. He's always been good to me. But no, it's a plea to Jim Irsay to stop lying to your fan base.
Frickin' Bowen.
And start acting like your franchise has a standard again. That's frankly kind of where it's at. And again, I just listed off the resume. We know what it is. You're in your longest playoff drought in 30 years. We've seen all these teams make the playoffs. But like, if you just want to focus on his blueprint, okay?
Mm-hmm.
He largely believes in, I would argue, 2 things: trenches and culture. Okay?
Okay.
In the 8 years, I would argue you have felt like one of his 2 trench areas have been elite in probably about maybe a 2-year stretch. I would argue kind of right around 2020, 2021. You felt like that offensive line was an elite unit.
Mm-hmm.
Never felt that way about the D-line. Never. And I thought yesterday was a prime example of it. Biggest game of the season, the Giants are banged up on their O-line, and you don't even sniff Drew Lock. So I'd go there. I think the individual character of players and wanting self-motivated guys is probably an area where I can get behind, but the overall thinking that culture is just like gospel, I think is a little too much for me. And if your culture is so great, why at this point of last season do you have multiple players being suspended for 3 games as you're making a playoff push? If your culture is so great, why did they not grab Anthony Richardson the moment he walked into that door and said, son, this is what it means to be a pro. This is what it means to play quarterback in the NFL. Mm-hmm. This is what it means to be a captain in this league. This is the standard of work ethic. And not wait till the middle of year 2 to bench him during the middle of the season because of that. I have said this endlessly, but to repeat myself, I don't think he has had enough of a focus or B success rate on hitting at the positions that matter.
Yes.
He would argue there are not positions that matter more than others. I would argue against that. Let's go through the list. Quarterback. We could pull the audio. We would have to go 300 podcasts ago. But I said the audio the night after Andrew Luck retired, that you bring your scouts in and every ounce of your scouting department now is to be put into that next year's quarterback class. Well, lo and behold, what was that next year's quarterback class?
Oh, don't remind me.
With the 13th overall pick, guys that you're going to watch play in the playoffs a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
Guys that we've watched play in the Super Bowl. in Joe Burrow or Jalen Hurts. And you sat there at 13 overall, and you could have sat right there. You could have traded back and gotten Jordan Love. You could have traded back and gotten Jalen Hurts. Ballard loves to trade back. I mean, when you look at that overall thought.
Yeah.
Wide receiver, first 3 drafts. As T.Y. Hilton's career is, I would argue, you could kind of see it starting to come to a close there.
Yep.
Or just, in general, hey, you got a 5'9" speedster. It's probably not going to be a 12-year guy, something like that. You draft 3 wideouts. Reese Fountain, Deion Kane, and Paris Campbell.
Whoa.
You move to left tackle. Anthony Costanzo clearly is flirting with retirement. Clearly is. Has made that clear.
Yep.
And you waited, and I would argue you waited too long. I think you found a hit, but you've waited too long.
You had to endure Matt Pryor.
At left tackle. Shout out to Matt Pryor. Did not have him on the bingo card today. And then you go to defense, where I actually think he has had attempts. But the 2 positions over there that matter more than others, edge rusher and corner.
Yep.
I would argue routine swings and misses of premium draft capital. Routine.
Quiddy.
Routine.
Right now, Latu.
Yeah, and you go back to Quincy Wilson, you go back to Terrell Basham, you go back to Turay, you can go back to Banagoo. I mean,
Dio.
Rocky Yassin. Yeah, again, nobody at the level that, second contract guys, core guys, side of the building guys, however you want to
right now, Juju
label it. And then just lastly, I just think overall it's just too much stress in the draft. He's had draft hits, but it's just too much stress when you ignore the amount of free agency that you have. There. So again, for me, it's Jim Irsay. Stop lying to your fan base and describing Chris Ballard as a blue chip GM, and start acting like there's a real standard of wanting to win here. Again, Saturday's the 10-year anniversary. Eddie, we did it a few podcasts ago. You've had more swim events. You've had more NBA All-Star moments inside of Lucas Oil Stadium since you've had NFL playoff games. And don't give me the Andrew Luck quarterback excuse. Every single quarterback of these playoff teams right now, they all were acquired as Chris Ballard took the job. Many of them acquired after Andrew Luck retired. So I don't want to hear that excuse.
If there's a guy you love in the draft and you've got him graded as a first overall pick or whatever, go get him.
So that's where I stand on Ballard. Now, I will say this. I want to evaluate each of these parties individually, Eddie. And the parties to me are Ballard, Shane, Gus, and Richardson. I understand there's many people that say, nope, all tied at the hip. And look, I've been a guy that said, hey, I think GM and head coach should be tied at the hip.
I agree. That's why I said earlier that they're going to go one more year with them.
So this is where I am torn. I will admit that right now. I'm going to evaluate each of them individually. Individually, to me, Ballard and Bradley are no-brainers. Shane and Anthony, I'm not there yet.
I'm just not a big guy on getting rid of the boss that then you have a lame duck coach and a lame duck quarterback.
I'm not. I get it. I totally get it. And by no means am I saying you force the head coach and the quarterback onto the GM. I'd be of the thinking under this premise, this umbrella, I'd be of the thinking of then, that GM evaluates Shane and Anthony individually. But that's probably for a different day. So let's move on.
Matt says, let me preface this by agreeing it's time to clean house. However, I'm unsure where to place most of the blame. Lately, it seems the way people talk about Chris Ballard, myself included, you would think this team was a perennial 4-13 team. However, we have had 2 back-to-back 500 seasons with backup quarterbacks when some teams without their quarterback barely stay competitive. So, ultimately, my question is, how would you assign blame for this season between Chris Ballard, Shane Steichen, Gus Bradley, players underperforming? The more I think about it, I think Ballard is the last to blame unless you say, well, Ballard is the one that brought in and paid these key players. Regardless, good is the enemy of great, and it's time to clean house. And that right there is the type of fan, in my opinion, that Chris Ballard likes.
Yeah, I would say this, Matt. Everything to me starts with the highest ranking official. So under this, that would be Ballard.
And it's not like they have any wins over good teams either, Kev. I mean, they played arguably the second worst, if not the worst division of football last year. They played Atlanta. They played New Orleans. They played Carolina. They played Tampa Bay.
Yeah. I mean, look at this year's schedule, too. I would argue from strength of record, it's probably one of the easier ones.
And then next year is going to be insanely tough because you have both West divisions. You have the AFC and NFC West.
Again, I don't think hindsight is 20/20 with me because I certainly said it back when Luck retired. You waited and waited on quarterback, so for waiting so long, you end up drafting the riskiest ball of clay the NFL has seen in Anthony Richardson. So that brings risk. And that's why you are in a quarterback carousel that has led you now down this current path. And then I'd also argue defensively, this is what Ballard has wanted.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, he wanted Eberflus for McDaniels. I think we sometimes forget a little bit of that. And then, Gus Bradley's the one that stayed from Frank Reich to Shane Steichen.
Yep.
Now, having said that, Matt obviously lays out some other points here. Yes, players deserve blame. And Gus and Shane, it's not just a simple, one person deserves all the blame. But the root of it comes from the person at the top of the organization who largely has made many of these decisions.
Uh-huh.
And so that's why I have to start with Chris. But again, I don't think just because I say that, all of a sudden it absolves everybody else underneath. I think there are times where Shane is too offensive centric.
Yes.
And it can't just be, oh no, that's Gus's baby over there. No.
You're the head coach.
No.
It's your football team.
I was about to make a poor joke about 9 months ago you made that same mistake, but that was totally awful. So I will not make it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, gosh, how bad of a comedian would I be? So blame certainly around, but Matt, to the point of it, gotta start at the top.
3 questions left. Next up is Brian. Huge Giants win. Now, hopefully, the Colts can get some changes in the front office. I remember when the mantra with the Colts was, nothing gets in the way of winning. Now it's all fluffy. The question I want for Jim Irsay is, what is your standard and why has it clearly changed? He's lying to us on describing Chris Ballard.
That probably boils down to the question I would have for Ballard. Irsay.
Can we question who's in charge right now making decisions?
Well, yeah, and that kind of gets back to Conray's point.
Is that fair?
A little bit early. Yeah, it is. And that kind of gets back to Conray's point. I guess the question I have for Irsay is, what is your standard and why has it clearly changed? Because his words to Chris Ballard are lies to us.
Yes.
Just take he is a blue chip GM.
Blackmail.
That is a lie. And, I would argue there's little to nothing on the resume that would indicate that. So that would be the question I would have. Why? Why has the standard clearly changed? Because, again, this is Irsay. Jim Irsay took over for his dad as owner in, 96, 97, something right around there. This is the worst stretch the franchise has had since Irsay took over. So, here we go. What are you going to do about it?
I lied. We had 4 left. Now we have 3. British Jake, and I can't believe it took us almost an hour to get to this point, Kev, but he wants to know your thoughts on Pat McAfee's tweet.
Well, I think at this point, probably everyone's seen the tweet, so no reason to kind of rehash it verbatim. I would say this. I nodded my head throughout. I think he had a 2-word phrase in there at one point of unwarranted arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
I thought there was a lot of truth there. I think
is
a lot
that
of
directed towards Chris Ballard there?
Well,
or is that tweet directly tied to Zaire Franklin and Anthony Richardson?
A lot of it is to Zaire Franklin and the podcast. And go ahead and Google that if for somehow you missed all that. I think a lot of it is there. McAfee. I think we all generally knows with Pat, and I've always, I guess I have to say this. I've always been a big fan of Pat. He's always been very good to me, and I have no issues with him whatsoever. But I think Pat has shown, if you rub Pat the wrong way, or whatever, you take a shot at him, that man ain't gonna forget it.
Nope.
And he's gonna go right back at you. And he went back at Zaire, obviously in a pretty significant way. Now, as far as the locker room is concerned, because that seemed to be kind of the root of Pat's message too, I've always found it odd that continuity has been just gospel. Like, I think it's okay to throw a different color apple into the batch. I think some edginess would be well served. Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman Jr., they both had a quote yesterday after the game, and they've said this at different points throughout their careers of like, we just assumed making the playoffs, and by the way, they made the playoffs in their first year. They were the 7th seed in that first ever
against Buffalo
17 playoff.
With Philip Rivers.
They just assumed that would become the norm. And look at the captains, Eddie, and I've done this exercise before. But yeah, outside of Buckner, who's seen the basement of the NFL and the penthouse of the NFL, everybody else is in-house.
That's why I was asking you earlier, do they have any winners?
Look at the offensive side of the ball. Who offensively is not in-house? Flacco?
That's it.
I mean, everywhere. Like, I mean, everybody has been here. Homegrown. And like, so no one knows anything different. No one knows a different culture. No one knows a little edginess. No one knows something that, hey, not everybody's got to hold hands and sing the wheels on the bus go around and around after each game.
That's like when you work somewhere and they fire your boss and you get a new person coming in and they're like, hey, we're going to do it this way. And all the employees are like, no. This is how we done it. So we're going to do it this way.
Right. No, I think that's a pretty good analogy right there. I think, again, and I think McAfee obviously said that. What I just said, I think McAfee said in much more of a direct manner.
Yes.
Certainly with that tweet. But I think to kind of parse it out into just a overall thought, that thought is what I've had of like, it's okay to bring in new faces, voices. And I would argue the coaching staff has largely stayed pretty continuity based. I don't know if they have a lot of like push the edge, which I thought the head coaching search was interesting.
Charlie Partridge would be the only one, right, that we can think of?
Yeah. I mean, didn't they let Mike Mitchell go? I don't even know who. I think they just promoted somebody from within. I'd have to double check that. But just in general, Eddie, I thought the head coaching search was like, oh, wow, Wink Martindale's a much different voice than what they've had. Now, obviously, they didn't opt to go that route.
Same with Raheem Morris, right?
Right. Who I do think was the runner-up. So,
and then, of course, the head coach in Detroit.
Well, I remember that back, yeah, to a previous cycle. So, yeah.
2 questions left. Jamie states, if Chris Ballard is out after the season, could you see the new general manager making a move at quarterback in the draft like Quinn Ewers? He is projected to go mid to late first round. Now, Jamie, I don't know how well you're aware of this, but there's a lot of rumors about Quinn Ewers right now that he may go back to college for another year. And I don't know if it's Notre Dame. I don't know if it's a team in the Big Ten that's willing to offer him big money to stay in college for another season.
That does seem to be kind of a hot rumor. I think the Notre Dame stuff has simmered a little bit, but at one point I definitely saw that. Boy, it's wild. This is where we're at, Eddie.
I mean, you had Cowherd's thing yesterday. I don't know if you saw that video that went all over social media.
I mean, we're sitting here. Our final Monday Night Football game of the year is tonight. Colts fans, cheer for the 49ers. This is where we're at. Eddie, it's tankathon season.
Yes.
You got to start to pay attention to it. Now, again, the Colts can't really move up much, to be fair. I think right now they're 12th. I think they can move up to 11th, and that's it. They can move down, though, a few spots based off what happens in Week 18. But, boy, here we go. And, look, I mean, 12th, I mean, that's not the craziest range. Where are these AFC quarterbacks at?
Yeah.
Mahomes is 10.
How high are these quarterbacks if Shadur Sanders and Cam weren't going to go anyway?
Nix was 12. Herbert and Josh Allen were one trade up away. Lamar was obviously the end of round 1. So, 12 is not the craziest position. But, Jamie, everything is on. If you make a change at GM, there's not one person safe. Hell, they might ban Blues Allegiant toss next year with a new GM. What are you selling in 2025 if you run it back?
Oh, God.
Every kid gets on Simba Cam that comes into Lucas Oil Stadium. Your crazy uncle can drive the motorcycle for a game.
It's going to be Anthony's going to have his first offseason where he's healthy to where he can focus on his mechanics and get everything ready to go.
And we're going to get, we're going to get the 45-second video of Richardson just peppering big time velocity and accuracy. And, oh, man, that's going to get just poured down our throat.
We're going to say the defensive scheme with Gus Bradley didn't fit and they're going to go somewhere else. And that he feels like the players are playing out of positions or not within the right scheme. And
everything's on the table if you make the change of GM. Everything.
Final question is from Ben. A game like this should get people fired, but it leaves them in an awkward situation with Anthony Richardson. Would they really narrow the search to a GM and head coach that believes in him? That seems risky with what he's done so far going into his third year.
No.
Thanks.
No, Ben, I appreciate the question, but you can't do that. Look, I can sit here right now, Eddie, and say I could see reasons why you'd want to bring Shane Steichen back and you'd want to give Anthony Richardson a full offseason to see where he's at. I sit here and I'm pretty convinced of that. Like, Shane Steichen is a first-time head coach that has been a 500 head coach through 2 years. Chris Ballard is an 8-year GM that's been under 500.
Yep.
That to me is different. Now, it's weird because they're at positions that I think probably should be tied at the hip. Richardson, I mean, you want to be uber positive on Richardson here for a second? Started 15 games in his career. He's 8-7 as a starter.
Mm-hmm.
If you increased his game by, I'm just throwing out some weird number, and I'm not saying completion percentage. If you increased his overall game by 3%, 8-7 could become 10-5. And if your defense got a tad better,
yeah,
does 10-5 become 11-4? And again, this is uber glass half full with Richardson, but like that is cutting ties right now without and look, if you've got the right quarterback, you feel like sitting there at 12, and you're a new regime, by all means, do it. Hell, I'd still draft a quarterback even if I brought Richardson back relatively early.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the quickest way to get this figured out and get the train back on the right tracks is probably the Richardson epiphany. Now, that happening, of course, is a big ask. But
my response to that, Kev, is would that require coaching staff work? Because I know you've heard things. I have certainly heard things to where I think the way for Richardson to get better is by Richardson himself. And it's not anything that has to do with the coaching staff.
Well,
whether that's
it requires
growing up, maturing, putting in the work, preparation.
It requires Richardson understanding what the capital C on the jersey means, and it requires certainly I mean, he ain't going to teach himself how to throw the football. You're going to need some people to help. I mean, it is a multi-layered off-season approach with the kid. Multi-layered. And trust me, by no means am I saying it's just accuracy. He's got to learn what it takes to be a pro. P-R-O. And, like, that's a big ask. And probably a lot of that is a little bit more of him. And, yeah, you're going to need people to coax him, and you're going to need people to explain that to him. And then you're also going to need the physical fundamental aspect of him playing quarterback to look different. I guess to get back to Ben's question, no. In no way, shape, or form can you walk into a GM search and say, hey, here's our job. We're keeping Shane and Anthony. No. No, you let that person evaluate it.
Final thing here is I know this was all over Twitter, which can be a dangerous game. I don't know how true it is. I don't know if you've heard it. But if the rumor of Anthony Richardson really turning down Peyton Manning to work with him is true, then that's where I come back to. I don't know if it's on the coaches at that point. I think that's more so on the player.
Yeah, I have never heard that. I don't know if that's true or not. Yeah, I mean, there's part of me that I don't see Peyton Manning really dropping all things to serve the organization that fired him. But yeah, that's just me.
Maybe the only way I could see that happening is out of respect from Jim if Jim reached out. But that's the only way I could see that happening.
Yeah. Whether it's true or not, doesn't lose sight of just how major of a reclamation project it will be with Richardson. But again, you want to be eternally glass half full. When he's played quarterback, you're a 500 football team. Can you increase it? Can you increase it at all? And then there are a lot of other questions about just staying healthy and all that. He's Eddie Garrison. I'm Kevin Bowen. Thank you, everybody. No one cares about Colts and Jags in Week 18. We'll talk to you a week from Monday.